Picture the absolute deepest, most silent, and honestly the most oppressive hour of the night. Towering up into this grim, dark sky is the High Cathedral, just this massive, imposing structure made of entirely rigid stone. But we are actually going to start our story outside. We're not in the warm halls. We are dangling on these sheer, freezing exterior walls. And clinging to that wall is the jester. With this wry, knowing grin on his face, he's peering through a high, narrow window, just quietly observing a very specific, very quiet kind of psychological breakdown happening inside. So, inside this dim cell, which is completely sealed off from the rest of the world, sits the philosopher. He's totally surrounded by these massive ledgers and dusty texts, and he's frantically performing what he calls the recitation of the grand machine. I mean, imagine him just gripping his desk, white-knuckled, muttering these cold, logical axioms out into the dark. Things like 1 + 1 is 2, the civic hours are set, the variables are classified. Now, to an untrained eye, this feverish chanting kind of looks like pure devotion. But the jester, watching through the frosty glass, he knows exactly what this is. It's a prayer by a man who will absolutely not call it one. The philosopher isn't reaching out to the divine here. He's deploying this desperate spiritual defense mechanism. He's trying his hardest to keep the iron cage of his strict, rigid morality from just splintering apart under all this immense internal pressure. Okay, let's dive into this for a second, because the philosopher's internal world is defined entirely by this iron cage. It's an architecture built out of cold logic, approved civic hours, and really strict classifications. It feels safe, sure, but it is agonizingly rigid, and it exists for literally one reason: to shut out the unlegislated night. That night is the impartial horror of the void. It's the chaotic, messy reality that doesn't care one bit about his ledgers or his rules. So the philosopher is just desperately trying to hide inside his rigid psychological fortress, hoping that his muttered axioms are somehow going to keep that unlegislated darkness out.
But then, deep beneath him, way down in the vault of the High Cathedral, a terrifying, groaning vibration actually begins to echo through the ancient masonry. I mean, the stone itself is shaking. And how does our logical philosopher cope with this? Well, he hastily scratches a little note in his ledger. Merely structural settling, he whispers to himself. Just the shifting of stone. You see what he's doing? It's a completely clinical, emotionless euphemism. He is building a wall of words for the maintenance of distance. He's using language to muffle the terrifying sounds coming from the deep, because he is absolutely terrified of what is actually vibrating beneath his feet. Meanwhile, from his really precarious perch outside the window, the jester is just taking this all in. He knows that noise is absolutely not just settling stone. That vibration, that is the Prima Materia. It's the Dionysian music of the source. We're talking about raw, unclassified, fluid energy that entirely predates the whole world of arrangements the philosopher so desperately clings to. It's the monster of energy, right? The forgotten origin point of all things. And the philosopher is literally trying to ignore the very source of the universe, simply because it refuses to fit neatly into his little ledgers. And then, the maintenance of distance finally fails. The stone groans one last time, and a jagged crack splinters right down the center of the philosopher's psychic fortress. Through that fissure pours this unearthly, shimmering heat. It's a fire that existed before fire was ever classified. The unlegislated night isn't outside anymore. It is pouring directly into the room. And all those frantic, muttered axioms, all those approved civic hours, they are completely powerless to stop this raw, unformed energy. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate clash here. The philosopher's illusion of a stable, orderly universe, what they call the gasket, built by the grand machine, it just shatters as the dragon enters. Now, the dragon is the chaotic brilliance and the sum of all things that this rigid system simply couldn't contain. But here's the wild part. When the dragon slips through the crack, it doesn't burst in and violently destroy this rigid Apollonian system. No, it just simply uncoils in the room. It proves that its fluid nature isn't the enemy of the system, it's the overflow. It is the necessary, undeniable shadow of the grand machine. Shimmering right there in the center of the cell, the fluid, chaotic energy of the dragon finally addresses the cowering philosopher. Its voice is slow, deep, and resonant. It says, "I have come because your structural settling was actually my breathing. I require no worship, only acknowledgement." Wow. The dragon isn't some demon asking for a dark pact. It's literally just demanding that the philosopher look at the forgotten origin. But, acknowledging this impartial horror, actually admitting that the structural settling was the breathing of a dragon.
Doing that means completely dismantling the philosopher's fragile ego entirely. There's no going back. So the horrific truth finally dawns on the man. This supposed sanctuary, the towering high cathedral itself, it was never a bridge to the divine. Actually, scratch that, it's worse. It is a monument to death. It was constructed for one highly specific, deeply cynical purpose: to prevent any direct experience of the source. All that grand architecture, it's nothing but a massive tomb designed specifically to lock away the dragon spirit and repress the messy, chaotic truth of reality. From the window, peering through the frost, the jester's grin just widens. He almost seems to whisper a silent taunt to the paralyzed man down below. Is the fortress a sanctuary or a cage? Because right then, the philosopher's entire world of arrangements completely breaks down. Utterly paralyzed, cowering behind his now completely useless books, he realizes his life's work wasn't about seeking truth at all. He built a cage to muffle the sound of reality, and now he's trapped inside it with the exact thing he tried to lock away. And the jester? He just watches this whole internal destruction unfold. He sees the brilliant, unclassified fire pouring through the cracked masonry. But, unlike the philosopher, he feels zero terror. He recognizes the glow for what it truly is, the music of the source. He completely understands the true, fluid nature of the dragon's spirit, and more importantly, he knows exactly how to harness its heat. Because while the philosopher is just paralyzed by the fire, the jester enthusiastically embraces it. By accepting the dragon's unclassified heat, he recognizes the towering cathedral for what it truly is. It's not sacred, it's just dead, rigid stone. And then he does the unthinkable. He literally uses those oppressive cathedral walls as a simple footstool. Harnessing the raw, wild energy of the dragon, he launches himself right off the heights of the tomb, leaping directly into the profound, unlegislated silence of the pleroma, the ultimate void. The jester finds this incredible, fluid freedom, while the philosopher just remains trapped in his rigid terror. Which, honestly, leaves us with a pretty heavy, lingering thought to wrap up this explainer. What raw, unformed energy is waiting down in your own vault, demanding nothing but to be acknowledged? What truths have you locked away, telling yourself it's just structural settling, when it is actually the breathing of the dragon? Until next time, maybe listen a little closer to the walls of your own architecture.